So thank you very much for taking time out to attend this webinar. During the course of this webinar, we'll be talking about our licensed consulting service offering. But firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gareth Redshaw, and I work within the LCS team here at Insight, and I'll be hosting today's event. Before we begin today's session, there's a number of ways you can actually join and listen to us. So if you feel you want to change, absolutely fine. You can either listen through the speakers on your PC or your laptop, or if you prefer, you can actually dial in using the telephone, and this can be done by clicking on the phone icon, which is on the top right-hand side of your screen. If you've got any questions throughout today's session, please use the chat function, which you'll be able to locate again on the right-hand side of your screen, and ask any questions that you want to ask us. Today's session will last around about 30 minutes, but if you've got any questions, then obviously in the Q&A tab, ask those questions away, and we'll ask those questions towards the end of this webinar. Please note that all questions will be answered at the end, not during the presentations. Just bear that in mind as well. And the presentation itself will be not just run by myself, but equally by John Nolan, who's one of the customers who's gone through this process while working for an organisation called Exodus. And I'll hand over to John about halfway into this presentation. So, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the licensed consulting service actually is and what we actually do for organisations, I'm going to go through that first. Once we've gone through that process, I'll give you an overview of the follow-on service we offer called the Consulting Desk. And then I'll hand you over to John to talk about his experiences. And finally, we'll take those questions from you, and we'll ask any questions that we possibly can, and maybe even take the odd one away as well. So firstly, we're going to take a look at our foundation licensed consulting service. This service is really there just to understand where organisations are today and build a strategy to adopt moving forward, with a view this can be maintained on a quarterly basis. So the LCS service itself, it's been built over a number of years, was actually established back in 2008. And what we're really looking to do for organisations is get a clear understanding around what technologies are used across the organisation today, what technologies need to be consumed over the next number of years as well, and apply this information to a licensing strategy to help organisations get to that end goal. And it really does pull together the best of our software asset management capabilities and our licensing disciplines that have been matured and developed over many years now. But pulling these together and applying them to a customer's own deployment strategy tends to be what makes the big difference for us. The service itself has really been built on the back of objectively reviewing where organisations are going. Once we understand where these organisations are going, putting the licensing strategy to sit against that and validating that making the investment of the hundreds or millions or billions of licensing investment is the right strategy to go towards moving forward. Now, when we actually built this service back in 2008, it was actually designed for our global customers. And as much as it was about validation, we started to realise over time, as we started to work with more and more organisations, the service itself was not just offering the ability to validate what people were doing, but equally, we managed to find cost reductions. And we started to realise these cost reductions averaged out at around about 30% over time as well. And it started off as a bit of a side effect, but now it's one of the sort of key features that we've realised exists for the service itself. As much as this service was built for these sort of large global organisations, that was back in 2008. We're now in a position where we've got very unique service offerings available for organisations, whether you're a global, 100, 200,000 desktop organisation, all the way down to a 200, 250 desktop business. But equally, we've got very specific offerings available to our public sector customers as well, and the way they work is slightly differently. So we've built the service offering to help organisations in that space. A number of key things that we really look to deliver, which is objectivity as a starting point. Unless we're objectively helping organisations buy that licensing in the right possible way, how can organisations be confident that what they're about to do is exactly the right thing, and in terms of the advice that's been provided to them? And that's exactly what we look to do as a minimum for this service. Next, we're going to talk around the process that we adopt. So the process that we go through is relatively simple, really. We take a look at what's installed across organisations today, and we match that across to what the customers are entitled to use across their organisations. Once we understand the difference between the two, it's what you typically refer to as an asset management project. That's the starting point. It gives us a view about where organisations are more than anything else. Where we really make a difference is when we look for the difference between that data and where organisations are looking to get to over the next number of years. And that comes in the form of the future deployment strategy. The way we go about doing this is by taking a look at 4 key workshops. The first workshop is the consumption gap analysis. This is really to understand exactly where businesses are today, but equally what asset that organisation's got before we start to look forward. We also look at duplicate technology. So often organisations tend to buy the same technology in terms of functionality, but from different vendors. So we'll take a look at that as well and see any opportunities to be a little bit more efficient there. The next is what has become one of the more fundamental workshops we deliver, which is cloud readiness. We take a look at 2 objectives here. The first objective really is quite simple. Is there a real business benefit in using cloud solutions? And the second one is more about, is there any licensing benefits in terms of using cloud technologies as a way of procuring even the on-premise product? Next, we look at doing our deployment plan workshop. This is where we look for any software assurance dependencies. We take a look at the vendor release and roadmap around when products are going to go outside of mainstream and extended support, as much as new releases are actually going to be coming out. And then we take a look at the product licensing and contracts of detail. And this is where we look at specific products and how to license these products in many different ways and what the best way is for each of these individual customers that we work with. We then map that across to various agreements and how different agreements are structured and some of the benefits of these agreements is applied at this stage. We then go away and work out what the gap is. The gap really is what is the difference between the current entitlement and what organisations are going to need per year for the next 6 to 7 years to allow them to get to that end goal. Once we've worked this gap out, we'll then build a licensing and commercial strategy to achieve that end goal. We start benchmarking against the 3,700 contracts that Insight's owned and managed over a number of years now. That data then gets presented back in the form of an executive summary presentation. Now, that executive summary presentation needs to be as easy to digest as possible. And with the way we do that is quite simple, really. We look for lots of different graphs. We map the data onto a 3 and a 6-year view. We look at every single year that the contract's going to be in place to make sure that we avoid just moving cost out to a later date and that we're actually going to get a proper cost reduction over that contract term. We also present data back what we've delivered during the workshops. It's made very clear as to why each of our customers is adopting the licensing strategy they're about to adopt and how that fits and maps across to the vendor's own licensing strategy. And as you can see from the graphics on the screen in front of you there, the principle being that this data has got to be easy to digest for everybody at every level and not just to the IT consumer. Once we've gone through this process and customers have then got the contract they wish to move forward with, we then provide the opportunity to move forward to our license consulting desk, which is a form of continuous license consulting service. The service itself is really designed to pull together the best of our asset management disciplines and our licensing disciplines and maintain that alongside the customer's own deployment strategy. And what we're really looking for here on that quarterly basis is any changes, because in the real world things change frequently with acquisitions, mergers, divestitures from within organisations. But equally externally to these organisations, Microsoft, as one of the vendors that we manage, typically changes licensing quite frequently in the way to go out and buy technologies. There's often increases in certain technologies for different license models, which can often mean changing license models mid-term might be applicable. It may offer some cost reductions, but equally by looking forward, if there is a change, we can proactively handle that change before the risk actually happens. Now, in terms of what this actually looks like, the service itself is delivered on a quarterly and a monthly and annual basis, and over that period of time, there's quite a lot of activity gets delivered just to help the customer get to that end goal. But I guess to summarise more than anything else, whether we're talking about our foundation service or our continuous offering, there's a number of key objectives that we look to deliver. Primarily, we're looking to pull together the best of our asset management capability with our licensing expertise and really apply that to the customer's own deployment strategy. And that's what really makes a difference for our customers. We've got to deliver this service in an objective fashion. If we're not objective, how can the organisation that work can be confident that what they're about to do is exactly the right thing for them to do? And as we look back on 2014, as 1 year alone, we delivered over 100 engagements with an average cost reduction of over 30%. Now, that actually represented savings of $100 million in 1 year alone. So we're very confident this service is repeatable for lots of organisations that we work with. I'm now going to hand you over to John Nolan, and John's going to talk you through his experience of this service. Towards the end of John's presentation, we're then going to take questions and answers, and I'll look at the questions through the list, so please ask them, and ask as many questions as you want. I'll be reviewing them while John's presenting, and then John will hopefully be able to answer those questions that you put to him. So I'll hand you over to John.
Hello, thank you for taking your time out to listen to me. I'm not a skilled presenter like Gareth, so please excuse me if I go off a bit. What I'd like to do is, first of all, give you a bit of perspective about who an Exodus Group are and what we do. Why I'd like to give you that perspective is so that you can see where there are similarities between your organisation and Exodus, not just similarities in technology, but similarities in pressures on the business and really the IT department. So, as Gareth said, my name's John Nolan. I'm the head of IT for Exodus Group. Exodus Group was a company that started in 2005, so we've just realised our 10th birthday on the 1st of September, and we, at the time of putting this presentation together, we had approximately 18 global offices, mainly beside or working with oil and gas. So Perth in Australia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, London, Aberdeen, Houston, Norway, Lagos, and a couple of other ones. Why am I telling you this? Well, we can easily go onto a company website and see how big the company is, how many staff it has, but that doesn't tell us what's going on in the background. So what we have is we have everyone from administration staff through all types of engineering where they work with large data sets. We work for approximately 350 different clients, mainly in oil and gas, some in renewables. We actually work for some banks and for some governments as well in advisory. So relative to IT, we've done 3.5 million hours of work. Pretty much that's in front of a computer for everyone. We now have 8 members of IT staff, including myself, full-time, largely based in the UK and one further in The Hague in Europe. And in 2012, we were the fastest growing company in the UK. So over the last 10 years, we've had 4 different changes in shareholdings. We've also started up joint ventures in Africa. We've had joint ventures with some pretty large companies. You probably won't know, but the Chiyoda and Saipem. So what does that mean? That means that we need to conform to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So because they are both traded on the stock exchange. So currently we have approximately 700 staff members, and we have, believe it or not, around 18 different types of workers. So we have contractors, we have full-time members of staff, etc. It goes on, and for each of them there are different approaches to IT. We also have approximately 30 other members of staff who are dealt with smaller companies that we own and do consultancy work, and we also have a recruitment consultancy, etc. So what does this mean? Probably similar to yourselves. It means that we're under pressure a lot of the time. We don't get a lot of time to sit down and look at something, strategize as much as we would do on everything. One of the things is that everyone is expected, or everyone in IT is expected to know everything about IT. So what situation were we in? We were in the situation where within the next 3 months, we were coming to the end of our license agreement with Microsoft. And we were in a situation where we were going to look at it. We were going to put things into perspective. We keep a tight rein on our licenses. So we knew what situation we were in. We knew approximately what was happening the following year. We had all our idea of looking at the company strategies and going in, looking at licenses in line with the company strategy. And we needed to be confident about the decision that we made and that it was going to support the company as best it could. Insight came to me with the LCS offer as an opportunity to validate, and really the possibility there was to reduce the cost for our licensing. So that's what we were focusing on. One thing that we are also in the situation of is we actually are required to adopt new technologies quickly. Why do we do that? We do it for 2 reasons. One, it keeps us at the front of our game. It means that our processing is quicker, etc. But the likes of home working, mobility, also is very attractive to new employees. And that's something that we need to do. We need to attract the best engineers when it comes to oil and gas. And it's not, these guys are very employable. So we need to give them something else that possibly another company can't. So then Insight came to me. Gareth approached me with the offer of the LCS, and pretty much daily I get emails, phone calls, everything from unified communication to audio visual to staff services to DR, printers, hardware, and everyone puts an offer on my desk saying, you know, this is a fantastic offer. You'd be crazy if you didn't take it. And that was my initial thoughts when Gareth came to me regarding LCS. 30%, an average saving of 30% is an enormous amount to us. So, truthfully, I thought, is this just another email? Is it just another fantastic offer? I'd be mad if I didn't take it. Second thought for that was, well, it's pretty much unbudgeted, so am I going to pay out for this? If we don't realise the 30%, I'm going to look a bit of a fool to the board. But if we get more than 30%, what's the perspective of me and the guys that work for me? Is it going to be someone looking at me saying, well, what have you done wrong that you've not been able to be this efficient? So the business decision really was, I took a similar approach that I do to all business decisions for the company, and that is it has to tick one of the 3 criteria. And the 3 criteria is, does it introduce a business efficiency? In this case, it didn't. I didn't see where it would introduce a business efficiency. Does it save the company money? Yes, that one got ticked. It did save the company money, or would save the company money, all going well. Did it mitigate risk? I didn't see where it would mitigate risk. So the big tick for me was it's saving the company money. So there was that. There was also the case that I'd worked with Insight for a number of years, probably 3-4 years. Had it been the smoothest relationship, I don't think there ever is such a thing as a super smooth relationship with anyone, so I'm not going to turn around and tell you that everything was fantastic. But I had worked with Gareth, and I also trusted Gareth. He'd helped me out of situations, and he'd helped me before. So there was a lot. I had faith in Gareth, and this was going to save the company money. So we were also offered an option to have what's referred to as gain share. Gareth offered us, we could either pay for the service, or we could pay a nominal fee for the service, and Insight would effectively take a bonus for the savings that they gave us. And I went for that because, one, it was less upfront cost, and any savings we did make would have effectively paid for that service once complete. So what did this allow us to do? It changed the balance of power between Exodus and Microsoft. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where, coming up to renewal, my Microsoft account manager is a really great person, but as it's coming up to renewal, they are on the phone and emailing me every day saying, do you have your numbers yet? We need to get this through now. We have, other people are renewing at the same time, want to make sure that you're still compliant, want to make sure you're still legal. They are gently putting the pressure on. What did starting the LCS process do? It took the pressure off, because I could turn around to my account manager and say, right, we have gone for the LCS process with Insight, and you will get the results on these days. So they backed off. So effectively the pressure was off me, and the pressure was off my guys. So the consultation process begins, and it was quite an enjoyable consultation process to get in with, because it did alleviate pressure. It was very straightforward, and almost instantly Gareth said, right, these are the dates we will do this. Working with me, he said, what dates are available? These dates are available. These dates, when can I come? When can we get started? What do we need to do? So that also took the pressure off. And I had a concern before it started that this would be effectively a capacity planning exercise, and it's not a capacity planning exercise. Going through the exercise, you're being asked the right questions. You're actually being challenged as an IT department, and you're being challenged as a company. It may be that you can't answer the questions, and you do need a bit of help from your finance department, etc. But a similarity I've experienced in Exodus Group is we do some coaching with ex-professional athletes and Olympians, and there's similarities in the leadership coaching, and it was quite a relief to see that this was to that sort of professional level. So the real world working discussion was the challenges that the LCS process put us through. So it was looking at how was the company set up, looking at our joint ventures, what's the potential for joint ventures in the future, what's the potential for partnerships. We were a rapidly growing company, but again, does that mean that you're going to grow? For example, we did look at whether we would reduce in staff, and we factored that in. In actual fact, we have reduced in staff due to the impact of the oil price just now. So like a number of oil and gas companies and companies that work around them, we reduced their staff, but all that was covered. So it wasn't a capacity planning exercise where it was, you have X amount of people sitting in front of a desk, you have X amount of laptops, you have X amount of process machines. There you go. This is the best option for you. So we also got presented with, Gareth showed you a slide earlier where you're presented with some spreadsheets. So these spreadsheets are really straightforward. You could effectively pick them up, take them to any one of your board members. We all have difficulty there. Put them in front of them, and they would be able to read them. There would be no having to translate for the non-IT people. So once we'd been through the process, we also looked at some, but which I'll go on to look at in a second. But what that allowed us to do was start the negotiations with Microsoft. So it allowed us it gave us options. So it gave the company options, but it didn't. We knew what really we wanted, because what we could see was what would benefit the company most. But that didn't mean that we went to Microsoft with that. What we were able to do was rationalize the options that we had and were capable of taking, and see what was the best one to approach Microsoft with, i.e. the one that gave us the most amount of power to negotiate. And that was effectively the cheapest one, because Microsoft, I think, had maybe assumed that we would go for the either straightforward renewal or go for very similar. But we were looking at the options and what we could possibly do with the company in the next few years. We could take this really affordable option, and then we were able to go to Microsoft and effectively say, yeah, well, we think we'll just go for this really affordable option, but we'd like to go for this other one, but that depends on cost. So that let us go through the negotiation process. And at that stage, Gareth didn't just hand us the documents and say, there you go, John, over to you, I'll see you later. What he actually did was he coached us again in negotiating. So I'm pretty sure everyone in this webinar has been through the process of negotiating with people previously. But a bit of coaching, like anything, coaching in anything, you know 90% of it, but that little extra 10% that somebody can give you is worth a lot of value. So that really helped us out. As I said before, we've been required to adopt new technologies very quickly, and that's a benefit to the company. But one of the added benefits of the LCS process, so looking back, we were able to save money. So that was the main objective of the process, but there were added benefits. I, as I said, constantly get offered deals on everything, but a number of occasions, whether it be hardware vendors, software, mobile phones, the thing that I look for with a vendor is added benefits that you're not paying for. For example, someone that you can actually phone up and speak to, someone who can get a resolution for you. We can all go and buy hardware kit as cheap as it comes across, but then you might not be able to phone someone up and really make sure that it gets delivered in time. If there are any issues, get a resolution to them quickly rather than it going through a machine. So part of the LCS process, we did an objective review of our technologies. So we looked at, for example, what what was available through the Microsoft offering and what we already had. So through that we were actually able to dedupe a number of our technologies. We used an email spam filter, and we were able to deduplicate that, effectively saving money on licensing, because we went for the option of Office 365, and with that option we got that included. And part of the process of the LCS is looking at your cloud strategy and how you're prepared for the cloud. And really, we'd looked at our cloud strategy, but the time that we spent with effectively an expert, Gareth, gave us a lot more insight as to what we needed to be prepared for and benefits that we could gain, because from my CEO's perspective, all I hear is things are better in the cloud, and we all know that they're not necessarily better. So we need to see where can we benefit and where do we not benefit. So there was actually, if I go back, there was three things that I make business decisions on. So there's risk mitigation. Actually, I'll go back to the slide. So there's a business efficiency, there's saving money, and mitigating risk. So initially I said that we didn't see that we would see any business efficiencies, and effectively we weren't mitigating risk either. But by doing the objective review, we were actually able to see where we were actually able to add in business efficiencies. So, for example, our exchange has gone to the cloud and our link has gone to the cloud. So we don't effectively need to, as hands-on, manage the servers that run our exchange, manage the servers where we were running link. We don't need to manage the backups of them. That's dealt with by Microsoft. So that introduced a business efficiency in our IT department. It also introduced risk mitigation. So from business continuity, we now have our link in the cloud. Prior to that, we had a number of link servers which gave us redundancy, but in some occasions, some scenarios, it didn't give us true redundancy, whereas with these items in the cloud through our Office 365, it gives us actually more business continuity. What we were also able to do was it introduces a business efficiency. Having over 350 clients, we often have to go through auditing, due diligence with investors to prove that we can give reports on our backups, etc. So what it's done is been able to say to them that we have Office 365 and our exchange in the cloud and our link in the cloud. It ticks that box. So we need to deal with other items, yes, but it's two items that we effectively don't need to deal with anymore. So it's increased the functionality. So it's introduced business efficiency, risk mitigation, and we've also saved money. So the three criteria that I was using to make a business decision were all ticked, and we saved a considerable amount of money on our licensing, and that's really it. So I'll pass you back to Gareth, and if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask.
Okay, John, thank you very much for your time just there. I do hope everybody found that very insightful as to how that could work for them and their organisations. So next we're going to go to the sort of questions that have come. We've actually had a couple come in, but please feel free to just put any more questions to us that you'd like to ask as we go through the first couple. The first question that we've got, John, it's a two-part question, so I'll kind of break them into the two sections for you. The first part of the question is, can you provide any detail around what was included within your previous contract? And I guess that goes hand in hand with the second part, which is what exactly made you change your mind and look towards using LCS?
Gareth, well, we previously had a perpetual license model, so we would have owned the licenses and then maintained, truing up at then the annually on number of licenses that were owned and maintained. Does that answer the first part?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think people sort of querying, were you an on-premise customer previously, and I guess that's kind of where the question's coming from. But there's only so much detail we can give there without breaching the Microsoft contract. So for me, I think you've answered that perfectly, John. The second part of the question was, what is it that actually changed your mind that made you think, actually, let's just give this LCS offering a chance?
I hope I would have covered that in what I've said previously. That one, I trusted you, Gareth. Two, effectively, I trusted Insight as a company. And there was the three. The biggest one was we mitigated the risk of investment, and I didn't have a budget to pay for the process, to pay for the consultancy. I didn't have that money budgeted, but we were able to compromise with you and look at the gain share option. So if we did save money, the money saving effectively paid for the process, and it seemed like a win-win situation for me. So I was also able to approach the board with that, and effectively, if you hadn't saved us money, you wouldn't have got paid.
That's very true, actually. Absolutely, yeah. I listened to it at the time. It'd be very true. The next question that we've got, let me just go through that question. The question was, how cost effective has it been for your organisation since completing the LCS project? And do you think you would have achieved savings that you talked about previously in the presentation without LCS being involved?
Well, it's been very cost effective. We've been able to introduce some savings that weren't anticipated before we started the process. So we've been able to decommission our Link servers on premise. We've been able to decommission our Exchange servers on premise, and we've been able to also decommission a SharePoint server on premise. So that's effectively saved us in licensing. As I said, it's also the people that work for me. Ongoing, it's saved us time, not immediately, because there is a process of moving to these. So if anything, it actually caused the guys a little bit of pressure initially, but now it's introduced an efficiency. So moving forward with the company, we will get efficiencies from that. There's also been additional benefits that are not necessarily so visible as well. So the likes of because we were storing users' emails, there was there was always a battle with, I've burst my email box allowance, even though we were quite generous. Now they get 50 gig. So no one so far has burst that. We couldn't compete with that in any way. But there's also, we've been able to introduce OneDrive and OneNote to our users, and they've been very popular. So it's added benefits that we've been able to introduce at no expense to the company, and will result in future reductions in cost, future efficiencies. It also meant that we don't need to back up those Exchange servers. We don't need to back up the link. We don't need to pay for the licenses for the backups. We don't, which is minimal. But we don't need to use the same size of media. Our Exchange servers were big, so they took a lot of time to back up. So there's been efficiencies all round. Does that cover it, or?
Yeah, I think it does actually. Yes, and I'm just looking through the list of questions that have come in. There's only one, and I think it's probably the shortest of all questions. It just says, give me some stats. So I guess that's really talk about what the impact was for you, John. I mean, the figures, we can provide a case study with all the breakdown of what those stats were, but ultimately the cost reduction was estimated over that 3-year term to be about a £400,000 cost reduction, and that was available through an actual real cost reduction of 42% compared to what we perceived to be renewing as is. There were options that were a little bit higher, and the options that were a little bit higher we disregarded because they weren't really flexible enough to get John to where to get to, but we used them as part of the negotiation process. Is there anything you want to add to that, John?
Well, the negotiation process, I can't give you the actual figure, but what the negotiation process allowed us to do was Microsoft, when we were continuing to negotiate, and we said to them, that's not enough of a discount, we need a larger discount. And I was told, we can't give you a larger discount. You've received the largest discount for any company in Scotland this year. So that put it into perspective for me, what it allowed us to do. Obviously, for ethical reasons, I can't disclose what that percentage was, but it made us feel good, I'll tell you that.
And the last one that's just come up now actually is looking back, through hindsight, would you go through the same process again?
I don't want to answer that, say yes, definitely. There's always improvements that can be made in the process, and I think I wouldn't say that's from an Insight point of view, but from actually an Exodus point of view, I think there could have been some improvements made. I think we could have negotiated, engaged with you at an earlier stage. So things like that. There aren't any. That's really all. There are improvements, but the improvements would have to be from Exodus side. It would be engaging with you and other items to do with the relationship between Exodus and Insight and Exodus and Microsoft.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're absolutely right, John. I remember everything was marginal at the latter stages that we could have been at, really. So I won't disagree. And that comes us to the end of the sort of questions that have been provided to us through the webinar. If anybody's got any further questions they'd like to issue afterwards, please do issue them to me by email. My email address is gareth.redshaw@insight.com, or alternatively you can email us at lcs@insight.com. And that leads us to the final sort of point of today, which is thank you very much for your time today, John. We really do appreciate that on behalf of Insight. And have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you.